Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy Cohen, and I run a podcast and media brand called Social Currency. I talk about the intersection of business, tech, and culture. So if you've been curious about the latest happenings across your favorite brands, companies, and want to know what's going on behind the scenes, I break it down for you. It's educational, but make it entertaining. Now here's a question for you. How many platforms did you check before you started watching this video? Did you check Instagram, your email, maybe a Slack message or two, maybe LinkedIn? Here's the reality that we're living in today. Our audiences are everywhere. They're scrolling Instagram at breakfast, checking their email at lunch, watching short-form videos during their coffee break, and listening to podcasts on their evening walks. And here's the challenge. They expect to recognize you across all of these touch points. They want your brand to feel familiar, whether they're seeing a 9:16 Instagram story or opening your newsletter on their laptop. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I design my business social currency across multiple channels. And I'm going to show you the real workflows, the actual Adobe Express tools that I use, and the systems that I've built to stay consistent. And for my work as a creator and a founder, Adobe has been the toolkit that helps me show up across channels without losing my signature brand feel and certainly without sacrificing my creativity. So first, I want to provide you with some context. For my social media assets, there are different formats that I create content for. In total, there are 6 different types of platforms, each with different aspect ratios, different audience expectations, and different technical requirements. And here's what I learned the hard way. Designing something beautiful for Instagram doesn't automatically mean it'll work for an email header. A stunning podcast cover might be completely illegible as a YouTube thumbnail. So the question becomes, how do you create a design system that's flexible enough to work everywhere, but consistent enough that your audience always knows that it's you? And that is exactly what we're diving into today. But before I show you any specific designs, let's talk about foundation, because you can't design for multiple channels effectively if you don't know what your brand looks like in the first place. So for Social Currency, my company, I built my design system on 3 core pillars. First up is the color palette. I chose a specific set of brand colors that I use consistently across every single piece of content. This isn't about using the same color in the same place every time. It's about having a recognizable palette. In Adobe Express, I saved these colors in my brand kit, which means I never have to remember the hex codes or hunt for that specific shade of green again. Every time I open a new project, my colors are right there and very easy to access. And here's a pro tip. When choosing your colors, test them across platforms. What looks amazing on Instagram might not have enough contrast for email accessibility. I always check my color combinations for readability too. Now, second, there's the typography strategy. I use a few main fonts, some for headlines and some for body text. The key here is choosing fonts that are legible at small sizes, because remember, someone might be seeing your content as a tiny podcast thumbnail, but also be impactful enough for larger formats like Instagram carousels or website headers. Again, I saved these in my Adobe Express brand kit. This means I'm not scrolling through hundreds of fonts every time I create something. I have my specific brand fonts and I know exactly when I'm going to use each one. And third, the visual elements and icons. This is where your brand personality really comes through. For Social Currency, I have a set of recurring visual elements, specific shapes, icon styles, and graphic treatments that show up across my content. Maybe it's a particular way I frame text, or a recurring geometric pattern. Maybe it's the style of illustrations or the photos that I use. The point is, these elements become visual signatures. When someone sees them, even before reading a word, they think, oh, that's Sammy's content. And it's always a good thing to create a signature brand style and feel so that your audience feels even more locked in when your content pops up on their screen. Okay, so now let's get practical. I want to walk you through my actual workflow for creating content for Social Currency across multiple channels. So let's start with Instagram Reels thumbnails. Let me show you how I approach this. So when I have a new podcast coming out, I need to create promotional content for Instagram. I open Adobe Express and start with a 9:16 template. This is the vertical format for Reels and Stories. Here's my process. I add the episode title using my headline font. I'll include a key visual element. Usually it's an image of my guest and their name and company, potentially with another image that represents their company as well. And I always make sure that the text is large enough to read on mobile. But here's the critical part. I'm not just designing for Instagram. While I'm creating this, I'm already thinking about how I'm going to adapt it. And once I have my real thumbnail designed, I use Adobe Express's resize feature. With literally one click, I can resize that same design for a format for an Instagram feed post or a 16:9 horizontal for YouTube thumbnails. And the magic is that Adobe Express doesn't just squash or stretch your design. It intelligently repositions elements to work with the new dimensions. And I always review and make manual adjustments if I need to. Sometimes text needs to be larger for horizontal formats, or sometimes I need to reposition a photo so that the focal point isn't cut off. So now designing for my newsletter is a totally different beast. The design that works for Instagram might be too busy for an email header. For my newsletters, I typically use more white space and simplify the visual elements. I'll often start with my Instagram design and strip it down rather than building from scratch. I keep the same fonts, the same color palette, maybe even the same central image, but I give it room to breathe. And lastly, here is where a lot of creators can get tripped up: the podcast artwork. So your podcast artwork needs to be clearly visible on a phone screen in a 1:1 aspect ratio, which is quite small. That means that you need to make sure that you don't have any tiny text that becomes illegible, and you need high contrast between elements. So simple, bold design choices are usually the way to go. And most importantly, your podcast name needs to be legible. No one is going to listen to your podcast if they don't even know what the title is. So now let's move on to the strategy piece. The social platforms are about stopping the scroll. Your designs need to grab attention immediately and work on mobile since most people are on their phones. So I use bright colors from my palette, large text, and dynamic layouts. Adobe Express has templates specifically designed for social that I use as starting points and then customize them with my brand elements. Podcast listeners are often looking at tiny thumbnails in a crowded feed, so I keep my podcast artwork relatively minimal. It's my brand colors, my show name, and my brand font, and of course, an image of me. That's it. An email is more intimate, more detailed. People are sitting down to read. It's not as scroll-inducing as a video that pops up on someone's feed. Your design can include more information, more subtle colors, and have more complex layouts. But I still use my same fonts, same colors, and same visual style, so it feels connected to everything else. And the last media form is your website. This is often where people go to learn more after seeing you on social media. This is where you can showcase your full brand aesthetic, use larger, more detailed graphics, create immersive hero images, and really establish your visual identity. And I want to share a workflow tip that saves me hours every week. I so deeply believe in batch creation. Instead of creating one piece of content at a time, I create multiple versions at one time. For example, when I record multiple solo podcasts at one time, I can create all of the promotional graphics for all of the platforms. I'm in the same creative headspace, and my brand kit is loaded, and I can knock out many graphics within just 1 hour. And I can't underscore how important this is as someone who is working on content across different platforms. It is all about efficiency and productivity to make sure that your designs scale. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Multi-channel design isn't about creating completely different content for every platform. It's about building a strong brand foundation and then adapting intelligently for where your audience is. With tools like Adobe Express, you can create that foundation, your colors, your fonts, your visual elements, and then efficiently deploy it everywhere. So I hope you got a lot of value from this, and thank you so much for listening to this session. I hope you enjoy, and happy creating.